Hello, you're listening to Storytelling Saga, the podcast that shares stories. I'm your host, Allie, and this week I'm so excited to welcome artist Sam Kays to the podcast. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Sam, I wanted to start by asking you, what were some of your influences growing up, whether that be shows, artists, art styles?
Obviously, Jonan Vasquez was a huge one. I studied his style when I was about 13, so that shaped a lot of my inking style primarily. Also, I think it's Takeshi Harada of the Disgaea series influenced my coloring massively.
When did you know you wanted to pursue a career in animation or just like that kind of stuff too?
I have been drawing comics since I could pretty much hold a pencil. I was stapling together little pieces of paper when I was 3 years old and drawing comics about an opossum named Hissy. So this has just always been the plan. I had backup plans, but this was plan A.
Nice. And so then what is your kind of favorite stuff to draw, whether that be characters or background, animals, like anything?
I love drawing the human face because the tiny expressions you can get out of it and how much it affects a mood. So character design, it works a little bit differently when you are working for a company because you have 20 people in the room who all have opinions about a character. Nobody cares about a background. You get a lot more say when drawing a background in animation than you do a character. But comics-wise, yeah, character facial expressions in particular are my favorite thing.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And then what are some of your favorite tools to use, too?
Ink is my go-to because I am precision-based. I could never do storyboarding. You're supposed to just whip through things and get the big emotions. Also, I love Clip Studio Paint. It's got a very fine pen tool, a lot better than Photoshop. Most of my work's done digitally, and I have come to abuse Control-Z really badly. So.
And so then, what was the first show you worked on?
It was Invader ZIM.
Nice.
Yep.
I know we
Enter
chatted.
the Florpus.
Yes, I know we had talked about it too. So tell me how you became involved on Invader ZIM Enter the Florpus.
So I finished art school in 2016 at the now defunct Art Institute of Portland. And for about a year and a half afterwards, I moved back with my parents. I was working as a remote fashion designer for Living Dead Clothing. And I was spamming my resume to anyone who would listen. And I still have a folder of rejection letters to remind me of how difficult the journey was. But I applied to an entitled 66-minute movie at Nickelodeon via their website in March, I think, of 2017. And in August, I got a callback. And it was for the Invader ZIM movie I discovered at that point. And I had no idea, and I almost had a nervous breakdown because, hey, I already know this style. I can actually do this. So they tested me for the position. I gave it my all. I even waited a couple of days. I put off work. I didn't want them to think I was doing it too quickly for some reason. But I, sent in the background tests, and they came back with an offer, and of course I jumped on that.
Oh, that's so amazing. And I wanted to ask you, I'm curious honestly about production-wise and how it works with kind of deciding who is assigned which backgrounds. I'm assuming that was art director Jenny Goldberg assigning everything and having to approve everything. So kind of how does that work production-wise?
That's right, and everything went through her. I was the only background designer on site. We had two other freelancers. I remember one was working from France at the time, so sign of things to come. But yeah, everything was submitted through Jenny. She would come back with red lines pretty immediately, or if, there was more technical aspects, she'd have a conference with you. But yeah, that's pretty much how it went.
Cool. And so then when creating a background, do you take into account at what point of the story it takes and how that plays into it? Just kind of, this is the location we need.
Definitely the first thing you want to take into consideration is the staging for the storyboards. But past that, especially with Zim, we did a lot of fisheye and wonk. So if it was a more intense emotional scene, you'd try to up the skew on everything. Or if it was one that was, snapping by really quick, you'd want to make everything a little flatter just to put more focus on the characters and not detract from anything. So yeah, emotion and tone really do play into how you draw it.
Oh, interesting. And so you did the garage, right? And then like something with like the town overview, is that right?
I did most everything on Earth, I did. But the garage scene was particularly fun because at first I went through the pass that they gave me from the storyboards, and it was, just a standard garage scene. And Jenny and Jonan come back with, oh, wait, we want to fill this with a bunch of Easter eggs. And I'm pedantic. I can do this. And so I spent like an entire day going through every episode. I got a Hulu subscription so I could go through all the Zim episodes and screen cap different items that would have existed at the end of the episode that didn't blow up or when everyone died. And I think I came out with 58 items in that garage scene that are references and Easter eggs.
That's awesome. So do you have a favorite contribution to the movie in general?
I think it is that garage scene. I was really proud of that. Well, additionally, in Zim's house, when all the trash is piling up, I turned that trash as accurately as I could, and I'm very proud of how I turned garbage by the end of the show.
So then what was it like also watching it for the first time just as a fan of it? Like, was it just, like, did you watch it with, like, the whole crew the first time watching it?
Yes, we had a screen night, and Nickelodeon's really good at providing parties for premieres of things. So we had a night where we all gathered in the theater on the Nickelodeon campus and watched it for the first time. And it felt like an updated version of what I loved so much as a child, and I could pick out all the little in-jokes that I stuck in there, and it was great. It was so great.
Oh, it's so cool. Oh my goodness. Do you have just personally a favorite scene or a favorite line or anything in it?
I think my favorite scene is when it starts going into everyone's different animation styles. We gathered a bunch of artists who all contributed like a few seconds. One of them was Spencer Wan, who became a very good friend of mine. I love Spencer. And his anime-influenced opening is one of my favorite things. It's so stupid, but also so beautiful.
I love it. And do you have a favorite Invader Zim character?
Growing up, my favorite was Zim because I always thought, as a kid, my favorite characters were always the villains because they moved the plot forward. They had the most personality. They were allowed to be outside the box a little bit. So I remember sitting at the kitchen table when I was 13, 14, and telling my mom why Zim was such a perfect main character. And she probably wanted to kill me, but it was Zim.
I mean, honestly, there are things to admire about Zim, namely his tenacity, that he never gives up, and his just relentlessness, his overconfidence, and the portrayal by Richard Horvitz. Like, it's just too amazing. Oh my god.
It's fantastic. And there's that Mega Doomer episode where you can tell the poor man has been screaming his lungs out and he's getting hoarse, and they're working it into his character.
That's true. All the screaming, just all the screaming is so funny. Personally, my favorite, honestly, is Dib, though, because the underdog, it's like you gotta feel for him. And then in the movie, what I love, too, is that there are those emotional moments, which is really nice, especially between Dib and Professor Membrane and Dib and Gaz, which is really sweet. So I liked that, too, that still with the wackiness and silliness that we loved from the series, but then it kind of elevated it emotionally, which I thought was just really amazing.
Yeah, and all those came directly from Jonan. He wanted to evolve characters in that direction.
That's really cool. How did you? So you met Jonan? Like, is he just like? I'm sure he's like amazing to work with.
His office was right across from my cubicle, and he'd just come in and harass me. He'd harass everybody. We had Nerf gun wars, and we'd play video games, and I kicked his butt in a couple of them. He always got me in Mario, though.
Oh my god, that's so cool. And then, so what was your favorite episode of the show?
I think my favorite episode had to have been the Halloween special, because I genuinely loved how eerie it was. And this was early 2000s. It's when things were taking a shift into being more quote unquote child friendly. And, I grew up in a house full of 80s teenagers, so I grew up watching horror movies. I loved to be scared as a kid. I think the first movie I ever went to was Silence of the Lambs. But it was great to see something that was kind of challenging children in a scary way when everybody else was just playing it so safe.
And so I know also you were the code lead designer on Nickelodeon's CG movie Wonder Park. And so how does it compare working in CG, comparing that to 2D animation? Like, what are the challenges? Do you prefer one over the other?
I definitely prefer 2D over CG because you are allowed to be more expressive with 2D. CG, you have to consider things for the modelers and also how the character models interact with props and backgrounds. So you can't go quite as extreme. You can cheat a lot of things in 2D that you can't in CG. So definitely prefer 2D. CG takes a lot of consideration for everyone down the road, orthographics, things like that. So you have to make sure it works in a 3D space.
Oh, interesting. It does take longer, right?
It definitely takes longer. For ZIM, I think I was putting out about 7 to 10 backgrounds a week. Again, I'm a very technical background artist. Some people sketch things, and let the cleanup artists handle it. I like to get into the nitty gritty, and for better or worse. But CG, you have to be nitty gritty from the very first pass. And if somebody has a different idea down the road, you have to build it again from the ground up. There's so little interpretation allowed.
Oh, wow. Huh, that's interesting. And I know also because, what is it, like with 2D, it's just basically whatever you see on the screen, but then with 3D, it's like you're essentially building the entire, whatever it is, entire character, kind of, right? Is that, I don't know, I'm not like so savvy on it, but yeah, with animation.
Nope, that's exactly it. So everything's got to work in conjunction with everything else. Most people want to go for photorealistic with 3D. And so, again, that expression is taken away, and it kind of kills me.
I mean, a perfect example is the Lion King remake, of course, how everyone like kind of makes fun of that, like, oh, like there's these emotionless, realistic animals. So, yeah, that's a good point, definitely.
I mean, it made money, so I know what they were thinking, but at the same time, what a dearth of artistic integrity.
They are making a sequel. They are, right? And I think also for Aladdin, I believe too. So I know they're making a Lion King sequel. Yeah. And I was gonna ask you this. I'll just ask you this now. What are your thoughts on all of these animated projects being rebooted? I know, honestly, like maybe this is kind of hypocritical because with ZIM, that ZIM was rebooted, but that was different because it was just a one-time movie. Whereas with other shows, it's like these series coming back. So, like, what is your opinion on all of that?
Sincerely, one of my favorite shows from the past few years has been the DuckTales reboot. I think it's Venture Brothers Jr., which is fantastic. And you can tell there's a lot of love from the crew. They put so much effort into the voice acting, the character designs, the scripts are fantastic. So if it's taken from a point of fans who love and understand the material and want to produce more of what they loved and understood, as in the case of DuckTales, that's fantastic. I love seeing more of that. And I'm really excited. I think they're going to do the Darkwing Duck reboot. And I want to see that badly, because that was my favorite show as a kid. With things like the live action, though, it just seems so corporate and calculated and devoid of everything that made the original so fantastic. So
I know, it's just with those, it's kind of blatantly a cash grab, with things like that. So whereas, like, as you were just saying, that if it's like passion and love for the original, then that's very much, you see that in the rebooted versions of things. Because even with ZIM and with the Rocco's Modern Life special, and with
Yeah, Rocco was great.
the Hey Arnold movie too. Yeah, the Jungle movie. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. And so also I know you are lead design for OddBot, which for anyone who doesn't know, they are an animation studio currently producing the new Muppet Babies on Disney Junior. So can you share what's been your favorite part just working at OddBot?
It is a smaller company, and I love that it's a smaller company. You get to know your people a lot better. It's more personal, the ins and outs of it. Also, I've been kind of put in the lead design position because I'm working on a bunch of different projects, so I get a chance to dip my toe into varying styles and demographics. Right now, we're working on a preschool show called Action Pack for Netflix, but I've also had a chance to work on this neat little sci-fi project. I don't know if that got bought or if we're pitching it, but it was targeted at an older demographic, and then jumping back into characters designed for preschool, and it goes back and forth, and it's just it's refreshing.
Mm. Oh, really cool. And do you have kind of a dream project you'd love to work on someday, whether it be just anything at all, movie, show, or just kind of your own stuff or anything?
I would love to do my own comic book. I know okay, the reason that that's a dream project is because, generally speaking, comics don't pay a lot. So you have to have nest eggs saved up before you go into it full time. But I've been working on my little stories, adult targeted, and I would just love to get those out.
Yeah, and so for anyone who doesn't know, you did the artwork for my comic book, A Rosy Glow, which I'm so grateful, and it's amazing. I can't thank you enough, as I've said. And so what was your favorite part of that? Just like, was it the characters? Was it just like, what came easiest to you kind of too, like with the character designs and everything, which obviously I loved, amazing, but...
I loved the proportions. The eyes gave me a lot of room to work. The story was just so cute and sweet, and I loved using the colors to emphasize how she was feeling internally. I loved the glow. I loved playing with the glow colors in Photoshop. It was, I don't know, it was just such a pleasant change of pace for everything leading up to the election.
Oh my god. I know, right? Oh jeez, what a time, like crazy.
Oh
And
my goodness.
so, and then also, what were some of your favorite shows as a kid? Like whether animated or just anything even too.
It's almost all animated.
Mm.
I did watch Get a Life, which was a surrealist Fox sitcom that ran from like 90 to 92. But past that, in the 90s, I grew up on Animaniacs and, all the Disney afternoon shows. I loved Ren and Stimpy. I'm having a hard time parsing that because I still love Ren and Stimpy. And then, yeah, at the turn of the 2000s, it felt like there were very few options in Western animation for me anymore because I was growing out of the childhood demographic. And in the West, we only treat animation as a children's medium. So ZIM was a refresher, but past that, I was going hard into that anime train.
Hmm. And it is interesting because nowadays, adult animation, we have these long running shows that honestly have no end in sight. South Park, The Simpsons, Family Guy. So, in that sense, it's kind of interesting how that's kind of changed because, like you just said, that in general people see it as it's just only for children. But of course, that's not at all the case. Look at, of course, Pixar. They're huge. Like, that's for everyone, so.
Yeah.
Which is nice how much
and that was the original intent of Disney, was not to make animation for children, to make animation for the child and everyone. And I thought that was a great mission statement that's kind of been lost with the Eisner era of Disney.
Mm-hmm. And just, how much, that's why I know I love animation. Like, I always see that, it's like, it doesn't matter how old you are, but yeah, you're right, that it's still geared towards kids in general, I guess, but, but there's just so much possibilities with it. And like you said, like with capturing character expressions and everything, which is just, and like the emotion with everything. So how it all just comes together. It's just so, I have such a love of it, of course. So it's great.
that adds to the reason that the live action Disney reboots are driving me a little bit crazy, because animation, it's limitless. And we're limiting it to photorealism, which they're doing great work. Those lions sure look real, but to what end?
I know, with something like that, just kind of, it should be with something like that, just kind of just leave it like for educational purposes, not like necessarily for like remaking a hugely beloved masterpiece that is The Lion King. It's just, it's just, oh my God, crazy.
Yeah, it's great when it's used to advance live action. Life of Pi still looks really good. And I just don't know why we're going full on CG I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. And then even with those live action remakes, that is the blends, like for the most part, of like take Aladdin, or like they're remaking Little Mermaid, like all of them, whatever, that it's combination of live action and CGI. What are your thoughts on those kinds of movies too? Because I know there was the Sonic movie that did really well, like just, and that's like for kids, but it's just like if you enjoy it, then that's great. But
I remember the first time they did it was with Garfield, and oddly enough, I was a child who was fanatical about Garfield, but I was so upset because I loved the Garfield Halloween special, and I had Thanksgiving special and all that, and I didn't understand why they were not making a cartoon movie when clearly that benefits the medium. I don't want to watch the CG cat interact with a human character. I think that's only ever worked in Roger Rabbit.
Yeah, very true. Like, oh my God. Because that was, like, really just so incredible. That's a timeless movie, definitely.
Yeah. And there's so much passion in that. You had Richard Williams working on that. And boy, you need to elevate your game if you're going to have those two mediums meet. It can't just be an actor looking at a tennis ball for 2 hours.
Yeah, true. Because I can't think of the actor's name. The guy who was the main actor in it, Eddie something. I can't think of it, but he was like amazing interacting with, Roger Rabbit. So
yeah.
Cool. And then we have, say, like growing up as a kid, I always watched Space Jam, which like take a look at that comparison. Too funny.
I mean, that was commercial as hell, but they really did a good job for what it was worth.
And we're getting Space Jam 2 next year with with LeBron. I'm sure LeBron's great though, so I'm sure it's going to be good. I think it's going to be fun. I don't know. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt. Like, it's just so funny.
I'm very interested.
I know, right? And I wonder, you think it's going to be CG or I guess 2D? I don't even know. I'm kind of curious.
I hope it's 2D, but I'm not sure. And that's kind of the weird thing, because 2D is cheaper to do. It's more time consuming, but it is cheaper. But they keep going for CG.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Because I know, really, for the most part, there are no more 2D feature films. It is all CG. So I wonder if at some point that'll come back around, because with all these Disney films, they are all CG now. So I find that interesting.
I would love to have a 2D renaissance. I would love it so much.
I think we're kind of seeing it a little bit with some of those reboots, like what you said, DuckTales. That's like an example of a reboot done right. And so who knows? That will be interesting to see down the line. I think at least starting like with stream, like on Netflix and things like that, and Hulu, because I know we're getting soon coming out. Well, as we're recording this episode, when this episode comes out, it'll already be out. The Animaniacs reboot too.
Yeah, that's another reboot I'm looking forward to, because they brought back the voice cast. They really captured the spirit of what made Animaniacs so good. So, well, from the trailers, but it looks like they did.
It does. It looks like, well, I didn't watch it growing up, but I'm excited to check it out because it just looks hilarious, first of all, and just capturing, I guess, what made the first one so special, even though I know they got rid of a bunch of characters, though, right? Like, it's only now the Warner brothers and sister and Pinky and the Brain. But a good sign, like you said, is the same voice actors. And I know Steven Spielberg is, like, helming it again, like what he did with the original.
Yeah.
And
I know they got rid of Hello Nurse, which I get that. Also Minerva Mink, which I get.
They are also rebooting Tiny Toon Adventures now as well. Yeah. So,
They're not bringing back Elmira for that one. I'm curious on that, but she was the Elmer Fudd Connect, so I don't know what they're going to replace that with, if anything.
Yeah, that's disappointing. Yeah.
Go ahead.
That's the show I grew up watching, though, so I loved that one with Babs and Buster and Montana Max and, like, all that.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for that one, too. So as we're wrapping up, Sam, my last question for you really is just, what advice do you have for writers trying to break into the industry, trying to get their work out there?
If you know somebody, don't feel bad about using your connections, because most people in the industry are connected. That's your first hurdle. Second one is, we were talking about Zim's tenacity. You can't let it get you down, all those rejections, because you will get rejected. But keep at it, and sometimes it's not even a question of your talent or skill, it's a question of what's hot on the market. So you have to keep attention paid to what trends are going right now. So yeah, it's tricky. You gotta be connected with a lot of different levers, and eventually something's gonna come through.
Very true. So just that's, yeah, in that sense, Zim's a good example. Never give up, keep being persistent, keep being tenacious and just unrelenting. It's just great. That's too funny. And do you have
who would have thought we could have learned something from Invader ZIM?
It's true. Yeah, honestly, with the crazy, oh my God, Invader ZIM's just amazing. I could always just talk about it. I love Invader ZIM. What's funny, real quick, is that I didn't watch it as a kid much. I only watched it a few years ago, getting into it when I heard about the movie, and I was like, let me finally watch this show, see what everyone's so obsessed with about it. And I was like, and now I'm like, I see why people are obsessed with this show. It's just too good, and I will say that's something I would love to see come back in some, as a series. I really would, because it's too good. It's too funny.
I would love to see it. I love the cell shading in that show. That's what introduced me to the depths of colors that were possible in TV animation that no one was doing. But yeah, I would love for a reboot to happen of that too.
Mm-hmm. I know there's the comic book, so we'll see. You never know. And do you have any show or movie recommendations at all?
Oh God, we could be here all day.
Anything, yeah.
If there's one I want people to watch, this is completely unrelated to animation, but the 1961 version of The Innocents with Deborah Kerr is my favorite horror movie, and everyone should watch it if they want to see a very good Victorian ghost story.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Sam, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Please let everyone know where they can find you on social media and anything else you'd like to promote.
I'm at SamBKs on Twitter, and that's about it. I'm so bad about keeping up with social media.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you so much.
And with that is going to conclude this week's episode of Storytelling Saga. As always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Be sure to check out storytellingsaga.com, and feel free to send me any questions, comments, or writing prompts by emailing me at storytellingsaga@gmail.com. Next week, Alvin! I can't do it as good as Dave Seville, of course, but I will be discussing A Chipmunk Christmas. Until then, thank you for listening, and remember, write what you love.